The Miami Hurricanes don't have a safety committed in the class of 2026. That can change on Friday afternoon.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Miami Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On this Locked On Canes, I went through all the conversations that I had this week. Mario Cristobal, Wesley Basaint, Carson Beck, Akeem Mesidor, Francis Mauinoa, and I want to talk about players they told me have been rising during this offseason. Give us a good idea of where the younger part of Miami's roster stands heading into training camp, which is starting basically in a few days. There are new Miami recruiting targets as the Canes are, maybe pivoting a little bit down the stretch of this class of 2026. I also want to talk about the impact of this executive order that the president has signed, where supposedly there's going to be this crackdown on collectives and third-party NIL payments. What does that mean for Miami and for the recruiting landscape? But I want to start with, and I mentioned Miami's recruiting board at safety might change today around 4 p.m. Up to this point, Hurricanes do not have a safety committed in the class of 2026, but a big-time target, four-star safety, Cortez Redding out of Jonesboro, Georgia, is going to be announcing this afternoon around 4 p.m. 24/7 Sports is going to carry that announcement. And for him, for Redding, it's coming down between Miami, NC State, Ole Miss, and Indiana to help break this situation down and to help break Cortez Redding down. We have the pleasure of being joined by the man we call the recruiting overlord. He is the host of the Portal podcast here on Locked On, also host of Locked On Seminoles, and a frequent contributor here on Locked On Canes. Brian Smith is with us. So, Brian, first and foremost, Cortez Redding, four-star safety, a player you scouted. Is this young man the real deal?
He's got the athleticism to play at the highest level. He plays in Jonesboro, Georgia, just outside Atlanta. He plays nickel. He plays free safety. He's a very versatile defensive back. I'm not sure which exact spot he'll end up playing, but I've seen him in man coverage, and that's usually the biggest key. He can flip his hips and run. So where he plays for Miami is the question. I kind of like him at nickel personally, but if you play him at free safety, that's fine. He just needs to add weight. He's 170, 175 pounds, which is typical for a kid out of high school. He'll probably need a year or so to develop, but the athleticism is certainly there.
Now, one of the reasons why I think maybe earlier in the summer we were a little bit unsure, like how hard Miami would push for Redding, is the size or lack thereof, and still has time to grow, but it's around 5'11", 175 pounds at this point. Or are there concerns about the size? But like you said, that may depend on where you line him up.
That's the whole key. Like, he's not the biggest guy. Like, size-wise, you say, well, he's a corner, and he plays some role that, like Jonesboro's defense, the way they use it, where he's in a lot of one-on-one situations, but they like him deep. They play him at free safety a lot too. They move him around. So I'm not sure how to grade that, because like he doesn't play in the box all the time, but he comes up, like his film shows that he will hit people. So he's a physical kid. Now, can you handle the physicality at under 190 pounds? But major college football safeties, they take a really big amount of punishment. So he's got to add weight before I think he's a viable player at Miami. But maybe, again, they use him at nickel too. Like, that's just an extension of safety. So he might have multiple roles for the Canes.
Yeah, and listen, I've certainly been wrong before, and recruiting can be a roller coaster. But with Redding's announcement coming down around 4 p.m. today on Friday, and if Miami does get some good news, we'll try to do something again here later on Locked On Canes. But I'm liking the way that this is trending towards the Hurricanes, Brian. I know that there have been times where it's really felt earlier in the process like it might be Indiana. He's got a relationship with someone on the NC State staff. They were feeling good for a while. I'm not really sure how close Ole Miss ever really was to this one for whatever reason, but the trends over, I'd say, the last week or so, last 2 weeks, Brian, have been firmly in the Miami Hurricanes direction. Do you think he's going to end up being a Cane later on today?
I haven't heard anything on the other schools, so as a general rule, that's a good sign for Miami. But as you noted smartly, things can change in the NIL era very quickly. So I would vote Miami, but you never know.
Yeah, and so I mean, to this point, Brian, it's been an overall very good cycle for Miami. The Hurricanes currently, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, have the number 11 class in America. And when I ran Cortez Redding into the calculator, like the hypothetical, I believe he would take them back into the top 10 if Miami lands him later today. That obviously depends on if anyone else lands to another school in the top 10. But this is someone who could get Miami back into the top 10. Miami has landed a bunch of corners, Brian. I think they already have a bunch of corners in the class. Do you think any of these guys from, we look at Camden Portis, Jalen Seatbelt Waters, Brody Jennings, who Miami flipped from Michigan, Jontavius Wyman, who Miami flipped from Georgia earlier in the process. How much versatility is there for some of these guys? Like, do you think some of these guys may end up like what you say about Cortez Redding, maybe considering a move to nickel or a move to safety?
I think multiple guys could. Now, the question is, are they willing to do it? This is where college coaches, they don't like it, but in today's era, you can't force kids to move because they just transfer. So I don't know the answer to that, but physically, like Waters as a kid, I've been around him a few times. He could play safety, no question. Like, he's got the stature to play it. Would he want to? Would Miami want him to? I don't know. Wyman could play it. Their corner class is awesome, but if they only get one safety, somebody's probably moving.
Yeah,
like that's just mathematically, somebody's got to, that's just how this works. And sometimes you let everybody start out at the position, you recruit them. If somebody doesn't work out, you're like, okay, well, here's your option. You obviously transfer. You can obviously sit the bench, but you could also try safety. That's what usually happens, and you find out. I think that any of those guys, Portis could probably play it. It's, do you want them to? And he wants to take that responsibility because mentally safety is a lot harder than corner is in terms of directing the defense, etc. You got to have the right mentality to do that. Maybe Miami will find one of those guys from that group and they move, because it's happened forever. A lot of safeties end up playing corner and vice versa once they get to the collegiate level.
Now, yeah, I mentioned 5, but I gave you 4 names. Now, the 5th name, who I assume is going to end up in the class of 2026, is Kenton Dobson III, who's he's strongly considering, I think it's going to happen, reclassifying from 2027 to 2026. Do you think Dobson could be a guy who's got some positional versatility if need be?
Possibly. I could see him being a nickel, a corner, whatever. He's just really good. That's a kid I wouldn't really care where he wanted to play. If he wanted to play free safety or corner or whatever, you let him try it and just work on it. Remember, he's young, so we don't know how big he's going to get yet, too. When they reclass, it makes it more difficult to project. But he's a kid that, like, we knew about him for a long time, and everybody's been recruiting him. If Miami gets him, whether reclasses or not, he'll find his way onto the field. It's just a matter of where. Let's see how big he gets.
So we're waiting on a decision coming down at around 4 p.m. today from 4-star Jonesboro, Georgia safety Cortez Redding, who's going to be deciding between Miami, NC State, Indiana, Ole Miss. Those are going to be the 4 hats on the table for him. There's also some new offers that Miami has put out there, a lot of movement on safeties and on defensive tackles. There's also a new receiver out there. Could Miami poach a guy from the Ivy League? As interesting as that may sound, we'll also talk about the future of NIL and recruiting, because an executive order was just signed that is going to try to completely revolutionize the way name, image, and likeness payments are implemented. You want to keep it locked right here. We got the recruiting lord with us. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, we still have summer sports in full swing, and then football's going to be here before we know it. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, high-stakes soccer action, and then, of course, football starting here soon, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. By the way, we're live here on this late Friday morning. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. And for your next listen, make sure you check out The Portal, one of the newest shows here on the Locked On Network, hosted by Brian Smith. I'm sure he's talking about this executive order. He talks everything NIL, talks everything recruiting, which is so big this time of year. Transfer portal, of course, which, as Mario Cristobal says, is never truly closed. So make sure you check out The Portal, which is available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, so I found this interesting, Brian, that Miami has recently offered an Orlando Edgewater receiver, another one of those big programs in Central Florida. Miami, by the way, has been crushing it in Central Florida. Like, say what you want to about, for some reason, the Dade County kids are not, they're not coming this cycle in droves, but Orlando area, Tampa area, like Miami can't get enough of these guys. Saphir Miller, if I'm pronouncing his first name correctly, is a receiver from Edgewater, Orlando, who recently turned heads at a rivals camp. Might have been one of the ones you were at, running a 4.4 40-yard dash. But he's currently committed to Brown University. So I would imagine the grades are very high, Brian.
That is one of the wilder recruiting stories I've heard in a while. Good for him. If you've got an offer from Brown, obviously you're academically inclined. But if you go run a 4.4, you're also athletically inclined. I'm wondering if anybody else, I don't know much about this kid, if anybody else will go after him now that Miami has made an overture. Like, usually when somebody like that offers, that information makes the rounds amongst college coaches. I'll be curious to see if he takes OBs or what he does, but a Brown education is elite. Maybe he wants to stay in the world of college football at a higher level, though. So good for him, and I think it'd be great if he ended up in Miami.
I think it'd be interesting. Now, obviously, people will wonder, is this like a plan B in case Miami can't flip a Tristan Keys or, Calvin Russell? So I got to ask you, this is like a mandatory question anytime I have Brian Smith on. Is there anything new on Tristan Keys, the LSU commit top receiver in the class? Miami and several others are trying to flip him.
I have not heard anything in the last week or so, but I talked to some people around Ole Miss, etc. Everybody's still recruiting him. Tennessee's made a push, but the Adidas thing is still the one part that nobody has figured out. For those who don't know, he signed a deal and he is quote unquote an Adidas athlete. I believe Texas A&M is Adidas and obviously Miami is. So, but he's committed to LSU and that's about as Nike as it gets outside of Oregon. That's about as Nike a program as there's ever been. So I don't know how that works and everybody's trying to figure it out. So I think Keys will be on the table until National Signing Day.
Yeah, so he's, of course, committed to LSU. There's not a whole lot of uncommitted players left. Like a lot of the players Miami is after are players who are potential flips down the road. But I guess one of the few uncommitted guys left. And every time I talk to you, you're like, I can't believe this guy's still uncommitted. And that's, 4-star interior offensive lineman Breck College, or somebody's telling me it might be pronounced Collage, or I don't know which syllable to emphasize, but I do know this is a darn good offensive lineman who's still uncommitted. I know Miami's been in the mix there, USC, Georgia. You hearing anything new on College?
I've heard that it's a 3-team race. I thought it would be down to at least 2 by now, but we've actually added. USC is definitely a very, very strong possibility. Here's the unique part. His roommate is Pepe, the kid that Miami went after. That he committed to SC. They're close buddies, and he's trying to get him to go to SC. So I've been told he's having a very difficult time figuring out between Miami, Georgia, and USC. Yeah. And there's no date yet. I was told that today. I'm like, okay, well, it is what it is. I just, I know Breck pretty well. He's a great kid. I thought he would be the kind of guy that would commit early, and it's been just the opposite. I don't think he knows yet.
Yeah. By the way, it was Josh Gross in the live chat says, and this is actually D Money, who's a friend of the show from Canes Insight. He was the one who told me this. So D Money from Canes Insight said it's pronounced Is that collage? I don't even know how to do the phonetic of what you wrote in there.
Yeah,
It's not collage, but well, whatever it is. If the young man commits to Miami, I will learn to pronounce his name. That's the deal. If that doesn't happen, I'll pronounce it however I want. If he commits to Miami, I'll learn how to pronounce it correctly.
That's probably what I would do if I were you too. So I know it's Brack. I'll just go with that. First name. I'm good.
Yeah, so a few other, by the way, notes of Miami's expanding their defensive backboard. Again, they hope to land Cortez Redding today around 4 o'clock. The trend seems to be in Miami's favor right now. But again, few hours, a lot can change. Just throwing that out there. But Miami appear to be trending leaders. Hurricanes have recently extended offers to safety Markel Taylor, who's committed to Cincinnati. Safety Jamar Owens, who's committed to Indiana. A couple of other safeties. These guys played together in Marietta, Georgia. Joel Combe and Tony Forney. Forney is committed to Missouri, and Combe is committed to Tennessee. Miami's also made some new offers at defensive linemen. They've offered 4-star defensive lineman Alistair Vallejo, who's committed to Michigan. So a lot of new names that are kind of on the board from Miami, and a lot of these names, Gabby Urrutia from Canes InsideTheU.com reported on some of these new offers from Miami. So the board gets a little deeper for the Hurricanes for these final few months. But an important question I've got for you, Brian, is big headlines that came down yesterday. President Trump has signed this executive order. It's saving college sports or whatever it's called. And there's a lot in this, of course, but I think a big part of it is supposedly, cracking down on prohibiting third-party pay-for-play payments to collegiate athletes. Now, pay-for-play, people need to remember that when collectives first became a thing, this is not the case for every collective. In fact, I think Miami's collective, Canes Connection, does a pretty good job kind of diversifying and connecting players with actual businesses. But Brian, collectives were essentially founded for the sole purposes of paying players. It's like they can say, hey, we put you to work with these advertising deals, but collectives were founded as a way to get fans to donate to pay players, which is, pay for play. This is what the government is now trying to crack down on. Could this executive order, Brian, could it endanger the existence of collectives? How is this going to change the way NIL is paid out?
One of the key parts of this executive order is discussing the words, as you noted, pay for play. Well, that's still an interpretation. So there's going to be lawsuits right off the bat. Yeah. And you basically got to do something instead of just getting money to go to Auburn or Miami or Florida State or whatever it is. They're just going to find ways to say he's done this, that, or the other too. Let's cut right to the chase. Anybody that thinks you're going to force multimillionaires not to spend their money, good luck. There's 0% chance of that. We all know in one way or the other, the bag man is going to be around. It's just whether it's out in the open or not. So they can say whatever they want, but you're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. Secondarily, you got to look at it from a collective standpoint. They're not under the jurisdiction of the schools and all that. They're going to operate separate in some cases anyway. So I don't know who's policing this. How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I asked several lawyers, and not a single one of them think this is going to stick very well, because they think until there's literally collective bargaining, which I'll just go ahead and say it, the schools want zero part of, because they're worried about the long-term health insurance and all that. They don't want to pay it. It's just like union versus employee. It's, all the management. It's the same thing. Until there's collective bargaining, this kind of stuff probably isn't going to stick very well. And they could be sued in a million ways. Parents, collectives, businesses, if a business wants to pay a kid $100,000 for doing one deal, how do you name image and likeness standard? They're supposed to have a standard, how much it's. No, you're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. So I don't think it's going to have a whole lot of factor personally. I think it will get blown up.
Yeah, that is a great point that you raised, that, how do you enforce this anyway? Right. But even if we assume the worst case scenario that they do find ways to enforce it, I got a question this morning from someone in our Locked On Canes Insiders chat who's like, hey, how would this specifically affect the Canes Connection collective, which is the big Miami collective? And I'll use a quote that Mario Cristobal always uses when it comes to this new era of college sports. You adapt or you die. So, I mean, in the case again of, because Brian, we're in Miami where there's actual Fortune 500 companies and big businesses that are behind a lot of this stuff. Like I'm pretty sure Canes Connection makes more of their funds from like actual businesses than they do from just fans donating $15, $20 a month. And so, you need to just find a way to make this work through advertising with these actual companies versus direct pay for play. So I always think there is a way to adapt and make it work, but it's definitely going to change the process for how players get paid through collectives. But that's on the assumption, Brian, that it doesn't all just blow up and no one's able to enforce it. So even assuming someone is able to enforce it, I think there are ways to adapt to this new reality.
Yeah, there's going to be adaptations for everybody, but how does it work to start off? Because the first day that you have to turn in all these deals is literally August 1st for the NIL clearinghouse. So the timing of this is not very good. It's going to be challenged. And I think a lot of schools will be literally brazen in their attempt to say, screw you. You're not going to force this to happen. And because the commercial companies, all the Visa and all they don't want anybody on probation because they want them on TV, etc. They want their fans happy to watch them. It's very political. It is very touchy. So this will be a long, drawn out mess is what's going to happen.
Well, I appreciate Brian Smith's time as always. You guys want to make sure he's busy. He puts out at least 2 shows per day. If I'm not asking him to come on mine, you can follow him on X at FBScout_Florida and also at LO_the Portal, because Brian is the host of the awesome Portal show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
By the way, we're not done yet here on Locked On Canes, because I was going through my own notes and going through my own videos from ACC Kickoff Media Day earlier this week when I had a chance to sit down with Mario Cristobal, Carson Beck for exclusive one-on-ones, Francis Mauinoa, Wesley Basaint, and Akeem Mesidor. Those were the 5 Miami ambassadors there at ACC Kickoff. And I want to share with you guys some of the buzz that I got on some of the younger players that have really been standing out in off-season workouts that I think are primed for big years. So you want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're live, so make sure you smash that like button on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you for making us your first listen and your first watch. And for the everydayers, if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, click the link in the show description below, sign up, and become a Locked On Canes insider. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours, breaking news, recruiting scoops, show updates, one-on-one questions and answers. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes insiders chat. Josh wants to know where I got this shirt. I am 99% sure that I got this at Caneswear in Davie. I say 99% and not 100 because I've had this shirt for like 2 years, so the memory gets a little foggy, but I think this was a Caneswear special. Now, whether this is still in the rotation, I cannot guarantee, because again, this is not a new shirt, but I'm pretty sure that's where I got it. Also got this question, is Cortez Redding leaning Miami's way? All right, so we're exactly 4 hours away from Cortez Redding's announcement. He's going to be choosing between Miami, Indiana, NC State, and Ole Miss. And the trends, to answer your question, the trends have been going pretty well in Miami's direction. As we talked about at the top of the episode, things can definitely change in the hour before an announcement. And for what it's worth, the intel on Cortez Redding, at least the story he's telling people as of earlier today, is he was really still going to sit down with his mom and his brain trust and kind of hash out the final decision. Like, his mind allegedly was not even completely made up when he woke up this morning. So just keep that in mind. Now, with that said, Miami seems to be trending, and I think Miami's been turning it up a few notches in his recruitment because, the Hurricanes, and this is obviously a player, this is not like Miami woke up yesterday and said, hey, we're interested in Cortez Redding. This is a player who Miami has been interested in. He had his official visit to the U back on the weekend of June 13th. He really appreciates Miami. Miami's been putting in a ton of work for months, if not years, on his recruitment. But I definitely think from where I sit, they've likely turned up the heat a little bit after some misses in recruiting at the safety position, like Devin Jackson and Blake Stewart, to name a couple who recently chose to go to other spots. So I think that's kind of turned up the heat in Miami's quest for Cortez Redding. But some player notes that I wanted to share and recap with you guys. If you caught my conversation with Wesley Basaint, Miami senior linebacker at ACC Media Days, that interview is available here on Locked On Canes on YouTube and the audio version, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. A young player that Basaint speaks very highly of is Kellen Wiley Jr., a true freshman linebacker out of Armwood, and when I was out there at spring football, Wiley was one of those guys who jumps off the page. Like I felt that way about a couple of the true freshmen. Joshua Moore, the receiver, was one of those. Kellen Wiley was certainly one of those. And Wesley Basaint said of him, quote, "I feel like he's going to be special. Once it all clicks for him, he's going to be a beast." And it's worth noting, I didn't specifically ask Wes, "Hey, what do you think of Kellen Wiley?" Like I asked Wes, "How do you feel about your linebacker room and who's really been rising lately?" And he volunteered that information to me, that Wiley is one of those players who's young and really looks good once he finds his way. Akeem Mesidor, and I mentioned this to the Truth Teller when he was on with me yesterday, Akeem Mesidor speaks very highly of Justin Scott. So 5-star Miami recruit from the class of 2024. He played a little bit last year, graded out very well, got limited playing time as a true freshman. But Justin Scott is someone who it would not surprise me one bit if he's one of Miami's defensive tackle starters this year. I think things were really clicking for him in spring football. He looked really good for the reps that I was able to watch at the line of scrimmage. And it sounds like Justin Scott is someone who's probably about to live up to that 5-star status. That was someone Akeem Mesidor went out of his way to talk about. So someone Mario Cristobal went out of his way to talk about with me. When I threw the name at him, Markel Bell, Miami's starting left tackle this year, Cristobal told me that since the beginning of last season, most improved player on the team, he said about Markel. And a little story I wanted to share on Markel that I thought was a little interesting. I know Miami people were always trying to play up that us against the world narrative. Everybody hates us. There's bias against us. Sometimes it's probably paranoia. Other times there may be something behind that. But there was a little something that annoyed me over the last couple of days. So, as a credentialed ACC media member, and I attended the ACC kickoff in Charlotte this week, one of the privileges, and I'm honored by this privilege, is I'm able to cast a vote for preseason all ACC players out there. And I took advantage of that. I cast my ballot officially yesterday. It's a digital ballot, and then it goes position by position. Like for when you're on the quarterback page, you select one quarterback, you select, I think, 2 running backs, you select 3 receivers, and so on. Offensive tackles, you select 2 offensive tackles. And it doesn't give you a list of like every offensive tackle in the conference. It gives you a list of, I don't know how they curated this. Maybe I missed the memo when I was supposed to nominate people, but there is probably about a little over a dozen offensive tackles that are nominated. There are no write-ins. You have to select the 2 that you want to vote for. And I was a little annoyed when I'm looking at the offensive tackle ballot, and obviously Francis Mauigoa was on there, and I selected him as one of my guys. I was looking for Markel Bell, not on the ballot. And it's not like schools only had one of their 2 guys. Florida State had both of their offensive tackles on the ballot. Several other schools, Clemson, a couple others, had both of their offensive tackles. Like Markel Bell was not even available to vote for. So you talk about being slept on, for someone who is 6'9", 340 pounds, and, started at least 2/3 of Miami's games last year on one of the better offensive lines in the country, and is expected to take his game to another level this year. I'm like, at least put this guy on the ballot. Like, give me an opportunity to at least vote. And, I just want you guys to know, I'm not, maybe I gave more love to Miami guys than the average voter would because of, where I went to school and who I represent. I didn't go like straight homer on every position. Like I did, I kind of went with the grain and went with Cade Klubnik as my preseason, conference player of the year selection. But I did give some love on my ballot to a lot of the Miami guys. But like, I at least like give us the opportunity to vote for Markel Bell. Like, was not even on the ballot. I was a little bit annoyed by that. Something I want to share with you guys here. So everyone always is asking me about Miami's wide receiver group. Who's been standing out? Who's been looking good? Because, you're losing the vast majority of your production. You lost either to the NFL or in the case of Isaiah Horton, you lost him in a transfer to Alabama. I want to play this from Mario Cristobal at the podium on Tuesday in case you guys missed it. He was asked about Miami's receivers, and I appreciated his answer. I hope you guys do as well.
Well, I've seen a lot of talent, and I've seen guys that also have a work ethic that is a little bit different in a positive way. We've always had hard workers on our football team. These guys seem to take the extra work to a different level. I think Coach Beard has done a very good job, so has Coach Varner. But I think that some of the seniors, some of the older guys like C.J. Daniels have taken a leadership role in bringing guys in before and after the mandatory sessions and getting some extra work in the form of the film room, in the form of route running and catching the football. And I see a group with a chip on its shoulder and with a lot to prove. And, we see a lot of stuff in practice that you can't really, gloat about out here because you haven't seen it. And there's no value in claiming certain things in the offseason. But we do feel very confident that group is up to the task, and not only to maintain the standard, but to elevate it at some point in time. So we're excited about those guys. We push them hard, and we push them to be just as involved in the running game as they are in the passing game.
Don't you appreciate Mario Cristobal's composure and calm demeanor? Did you guys see Mike Norvell at the podium on Wednesday? I was like ranting and screaming like a lunatic. Like I guess you come off 2-10, the collar gets a little hot, you lose your mind a little bit, but Cristobal is so composed and calm up there at that podium. But, the work ethic part you appreciate, to have, one of the reasons why you bring in a 6-year senior like C.J. Daniels, it's not only his ability that he's proven as a receiver throughout time, was at LSU last year, put up big numbers at Liberty prior to that. So he's done everything, but to have someone in there that's going to meet with his teammates, his room before and after practice and kind of set that extra leadership tone, I think CJ Daniels is going to be an invaluable addition to this group. But you hear what Cristobal said near the end of that quote, where he's like, hey, there are certain things that, like, I don't want to gloat too much when you talk about practices and off season, but in terms of plays that are getting made, there is this belief, and they have to actually prove it on the field. There's so much that goes into that, but there is a belief that the ceiling for Miami's receiver group this year could even be higher than it was last year. There's a lot that goes into reaching that ceiling. But when you talk about these crazy plays that are getting made, Josh Moore, true freshman, big-bodied, contested balls, one-handed catches, like he showed some like damn type of plays throughout spring football, and I hear off-season workouts, same thing for him. The guy who was, when I was out there in spring, providing some highlight reel grabs in practice was JoJo Trader, was very consistent with that. Malachi Toney, right? We all saw what he did in the spring game and did throughout spring practices, just to name a few of these guys. So there are high-level plays getting made out there, and that's excluding guys like Keelan Marion. We're not on the team yet in spring. He transferred in after. Tony Johnson at the slot, same thing. So the receiver room wasn't even full during spring football. But I understand what Mario's saying, because there have been like plays that have been made in the workouts and on the practice field by Miami receivers where you're saying, okay, this group can be really, really, really good. But I get it why Mario doesn't want to gloat about that in, late July, because, practice is practice. They got to go out there, and, Carson Beck has to get on the same page with these guys. So, all right, good point by Delane on Mike Norvell. He says, if you were coaching for your job, you'd sound like Mike on the podium too. I mean, you guys, listen, I'm not saying, oh, that was a terrible job by Norvell at the podium. Like when I watch those clips, I'm like, it's pretty good. This gives me something to talk about on Locked On ACC. But he was very animated. He was yelling for reasons I didn't fully understand. Most of the other coaches who spoke this week had a lot of composure, Mario Cristobal included. I want to thank everyone for making us your first listen and your first watch. If you're catching us live right now, it's 10 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure to smash that like button. Share the episode if you can. Subscribe. If you're watching the replay, smash that like button. If you're listening to the replay, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. And we'll talk to you again. If Miami gets some good news in a few hours on Cortez Redding, we'll try to sneak in another episode tonight. We'll talk to you later on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.